Hello.
Good morning, Soraya. How we doing?
I'm doing good. You?
I'm doing great. So can you believe that by the time this airs, we've already passed our 1 year mark?
What?
That's crazy, right?
It seems like yesterday.
So for something that I thought would be 6 to 8 episodes, here we are pushing 50.
There's something to be said for being dedicated.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know what to say, but yeah, I think both of us are pleasantly surprised at how many episodes we've got.
Yeah, once we started to add on guests, it grew considerably.
Who knew?
So hopefully you had a good birthday.
I did. Thank you.
Day after, so we're recovering. Steve Wynn said he offered you some psilocybin soda, so hopefully you're coming down from that, or maybe not.
Take one sip and then you jump to the next day. It's just like whoop.
Nice. And a couple days ago, by the time this post, we offered up a contest. So we got a couple different things that people can do. Write in and tell us about their favorite episode or some questions that they wish we would have asked. And there's a few different prizes that they could choose from, which is really cool.
That is true. So for more information, you can definitely check out our Facebook, our Twitter, or Instagram.
Yes. Do it. Time is ticking.
Time is running.
So today we have on the show Vitus.
Yeah, man.
This is gonna be cool.
This is honestly, you look at Vitus's record of his work, the resume of his work, and you just go, man, when does this guy sleep?
Right? Yeah. Not only with his work in music, but his daytime job as an architect and if you've seen the designs of his homes, they're amazing. It's like art. For sure.
They're spectacular, really.
Well, let's give this guy a call. Let's get started.
Absolutely. Hi, this is Soraya.
And this is Jeff.
Our podcast is called Paisley Stage, Raspberry and Rhyme.
A podcast where the two of us play music that we like and share anecdotes and background about the tunes.
We hope you'll join our conversation. And without further ado, a grooviar.
Let's get groovy. All right, let's give Vitus a call. Hey, Vitus.
Hello.
Good morning, Mr. Vitus. This is Soraya and Jeff.
Hey, good morning, you guys. How are you?
We're doing
all right.
Hey, Soraya.
Thank you, and happy early birthday, Vitus. And thank you to Trotsky IcePick and Cake for Soraya. That was pretty spectacular. Thank you.
Yeah, that was the long extended version.
That was the extended dance remix. I'm all for it.
Yes. Yeah.
Well, Vitus, we want to thank you for joining us today. And for our listeners on today's show, we're talking to a guy that has not only one, but two new releases that we've been listening to lately. Jukebox in the LA River by Danny and the Doorknobs, and I Haunted Myself by Trotsky IcePick. Today we're talking to Vitus Mataré. Vitus was part of the original lineup for The Last, then went on to start Danny and the Doorknobs and Trotsky IcePick, in addition to being a musician, a singer, and a songwriter. Jeff, I want you to take a comfy seat for this, okay? Vitus has produced a number of records, including music from The Urinals, 100 Flowers, Wednesday Week, The Point, The Question, Gun Club, 10 Foot Faces, The Leaving Trains, Angst, White Glove Test, the band Jeff was in, and many, many more. And we also need to mention that Vitus is also an incredible architect, having designed some absolutely stunning homes in a style that's been described as a classic modernist style. Needless to say, there's so much to talk about. Vitus, welcome to Paisley Stage, Raspberry and Rhyme.
Thank you. So excited to be here. This is fun.
Awesome. We're ready.
We're glad that you're taking time out to talk to us. But before we get started, I wanted to mention something that worries me a little bit. So the last time that we were together at Alex's bar in Long Beach, Soraya and I were talking to you about the meaning of your name. And I think it was something along the lines that...
Depends on how you pronounce it. Soraya just pronounced it correctly. If you think of it as a Spanish name, then it is the future tense of to kill. I shall kill. And my first name, of course, means life, living, or whatever. To have experienced, I shall kill. That's one way to translate my name.
Okay.
It's a good punk rock name.
It is.
I was always looking to change my name to have something cooler that people could actually pronounce on the records, and Joe Nolte forbade that. When we were going to put out She Don't Know Why I'm Here, I wanted to be Jack Shit. And Jack Reynolds, picked some other horrible name, and he was going to be Andy Gump or something. But anyway, Joe said, no way, you guys use your real names or no credit or whatever. So he was right. I'm glad I didn't bother with that. That would have been another Danny and the Doorknobs thing dragging along.
Well, it's a great name, and I've known you for a lot of years, and I'm still alive, so that's good.
Yes, no, I've never killed anyone, nor shall I.
But you've killed it on stage, and you've killed it in some of your music, so that's good. So.
Yes, but it wasn't intentional.
And I meant that in a good way. So, all right.
Yes, I know.
Okay, so we've posted, speaking of Joe Nolte, we posted a couple episodes that we had with him, and immediately we got a few different responses begging for different views about the history of the last. So, of course, the first thing we thought of is we need to talk to Vitus. So can you tell our listeners a little bit how it was working with the Nolte brothers and recording music and playing with the last?
Yeah, well, let's start off by just talking about the three Nolte brothers that were actually in the band. John Nolte was in the band for a brief period playing bass before he gave the bass to David, which I think was a Christmas present or something around the time that David turned 15. You put two Noltes in the room, you're going to get completely different stories. These guys are, intense individualists. These guys are really creative, and they don't agree on anything. These brothers could not be more different from one another. It's the whole there's a whole spectrum of intensity there with these guys.
Wow.
So David Nolte's version of what the last was about is very different than Joe's, and will be very different than mine. And it's not. I think we experienced it very differently. I first met Joe in 1972, and I'd just gotten out of a boarding school in Germany and was cut loose here at Palisades High and was immediately expelled. And I was the only guy to be expelled, not for a drug-related thing. I got a teacher so mad that she punched me in the face, and they expelled me. So I ended up, I told my mom I wanted to go anywhere else, just whatever, other school. And she figured, well, if there's a problem, I wasn't living with my parents, how about we send you to Loyola? And my first day at Loyola, I met Joe. And Joe was sort of, he was like the best musician on campus. There's one other guy that was a great guitar player, but everybody wanted to be in Joe's band, and Joe was this walking library of musical knowledge and good grasp music theory, which I lacked. And we immediately began bragging about our record collections and bragging about these bands that we had. And it only led to us sort of merging our acts. And the main guy that Joe was playing with was a guy named Henry Spiller, who was a multi-instrumentalist and one of the coolest people you could ever hope to meet. And he's still in music, but he wouldn't have been interested in doing the punk rock thing, but he was part of our high school band. And the guy that I brought into the band was a guy named David Harbison, who was my very best friend and who really helped Joe start the last. I should explain that I didn't want to be in a band. I wanted to produce bands. I wanted to make recordings. I didn't want to stand on stage with people looking at me. That was of no interest to me. I really just wanted to create sounds and be, the man behind the curtain. That always appealed to me. But having met Joe and realizing that I'm with this guy that is an incredible songwriter and who has a presence, who can really present his material, inspired me to whatever this guy needs. I'm gonna do this stuff. And to this day, I feel the same way about Joe. He is able to put together songs that are really unique, and he does it in a way that a mountain lion just went by the door. Anyway, looking at me.
Wow. Wow.
Anyway, yeah, Joe's just great. And we did a few of the high school things and played a couple of block parties and other dance things in the mid-'70s. And it took a couple of years for Joe to put together this band, The Last. Now, where we disagree is he thought of the early stuff as being one type of music we were doing, which is a combination of folk rock, prog rock, and some pentangle covers thrown in, and a lot of Kinks songs turned into a medley, stuff like that. To me, it was all The Last. It was always the same thing, and it's you still hear those same influences in the songs that Joe is probably still writing today that we don't get to hear. And that's the biggest problem for me is there are only a few Last albums out there, But Joe was writing a song a day here, and he still knows all the songs. They're in his head. So many of these songs need to be captured and recorded, and that's, I think, more important than live shows and all this other stuff. Great to go out and play the LA Explosion record again, but there are much better songs that Joe has written, and that everybody would love to hear them.
Wow.
Okay. I think I feel a project brewing. For the producer.
Well, I can't do projects with.
Feel a project.
Yeah. Well, Joe and I have one thing we have in common. We talk a lot. You guys already noticed that, right? There's that Look Again record that really bit the one, and there is talk of that finally being released. And Randall Wixon is behind it this time. And there's no impediments here, but it needs to be properly mixed with no overdubs, no special effects, no changing the record around. When we were recording that, I was locked out of the control room. Joe didn't even want to deal with these people that we were recording with. I was supposed to go in there and mix with the guy, and there's a sliding glass door to the control room, and the guy just locked and pulled the curtain. They wanted us out of the studio. We'd had a falling out. And so the mixes that he did, which was just rolling the tape off, is what is on that test pressing. And to be pointed out, the 12-string Rickenbacker direct injected into a console, along with an old Farfisa organ and a Rickenbacker bass, no amp, just direct injected to record the record. That is going to just give us crap, not even a decent demo. And that's what's out there. So it needs to be somehow livened up. And the worst part of it was that John Frank really couldn't hear what we were doing, and he was playing catch-up. Now, we rush the beat when we're not playing with John. John's like tagging along, John Frank, the drummer, trying to keep this together. And we only get one or two takes. That's it. That song's done. These are complicated songs. We can't hear each other, and we don't have any amps. It's just the record was not going to work out. But the songs were great, and Joe's gone back and re-recorded a bunch of them, and his new versions are better than those old versions. But people want the old versions. We get that. We're not going to go in and rework them. We're just going to try to make them a little bit more listenable.
Wow.
You just blew my mind. Jeff, can you imagine that? We're actually going to hear it?
No.
Hear it say that it should sound? I like it.
I love that.
Yeah.
I like it.
It's like...
sorry, Jeff, go ahead.
I'll get to that in a minute. Go ahead.
Okay. I wanted to ask you about one song. I do want to go back to LA Explosion for a second and talk about one song that you wrote, A Fool Like You. It starts and ends with this stanza. What's a fool like you got his hand in the jar, telling us lies till we don't know who we are. See your words take their toll. The truth we see, you've no control.
What's a fool like you doing up on a chair? Not that I mind, and I don't really care, but it's so sad to see it go, going mad. What a show. What's a fool like you doing there in the streets? You can't walk straight, you can't lift up your feet. Nothing new, lots of you everywhere. You're just for me, I don't mind if I stare. What's a fool like you singing songs in today? You're over the hill, you got nothing to say. Got no guts, ain't got no head. If you had eyes, you'd see I'm dead. Watch me turn your world around. Take your mess back underground.
Who's this message directed to?
Well, things never went smoothly for the last. We always directed our anger at different people, events, objects, and bars. So the first record, I was trying to write songs that would somehow augment or fill in things that weren't necessarily already covered in Joe's, broad range of songwriting ability. And when we got his contract, and thanks to the work of Randall Wixson and Greg Shaw, I wanted to have something on there, but it didn't really make sense. We had this chance of about 12 songs. Joe's got 160 great songs, so it's hard to even, drop one of those. I'm going to come in with one of my half-baked little tunes. So in the end, we decided there's going to be one, George Harrison, throw him a bone kind of tune there that I get to put on there. And I thought, look, all these years we've been playing, Joe's been playing, Hoot Night at the Troubadour. We've been playing all kinds of crappy things. We've been talking to these A&R guys, and they're all a-holes. People aren't really coming to our shows. There's always some guy sitting on a chair at the bar who gets the free company drinks and who walks out through our sets, and that with our audience. So I had a song for that guy. Like you. And our little joke used to be, 1, 2, 3, 4, punk rock countdown, folk rock, and then we'd go into the song. So we thought we'd have a little folky intro and then give this guy an aggressive little push of what we thought of him. Well, before we were done recording this record, LA Explosion, and it's a great story. For me, one of the best experiences being in a band was getting to record LA Explosion with John Harrison of Hawkwind. That was just the best. And hanging out, meeting Frank Zappa, hanging out with all these people over the Village Recorders was just an amazing time in my life. So when we were doing this, and then the record was, there's all this debate about whether or not to put it out, and was it going to be power pop? There's a lot of great Shaw stuff going on. We decided, I think we're going to be ripped off here. So that was projecting into the future. There's going to be some guy, when we make it, some guy's going to rip us off financially. So I just lumped in a bar stool that was going to walk out in the middle of our set. So it's just an anti-record industry song.
Wow.
Those guys will always be there, and they have nothing to do with us. We want nothing to do with them. But at the time, 1977, you had to rely on some sort of record company to do it yourself, and really didn't carry much weight. You were hoping that somehow you weren't going to get shouted down. People that liked the music that we were playing would at least have a chance to hear it.
Wow. I love that story. That's a great story.
That's the best story.
Yeah, and it's still relevant.
Being our guy on the bar stool, we don't trust him, we don't like him, we know he's going to screw us in the end.
Yeah.
1, 2, 3, 4.
So it's
Rock.
Yep.
There you go.
So that message is definitely still relatable today in different aspects. I mean, you could think about a boss, you could think about the government, you could think about different kinds of authorities, but it's definitely still relevant today. But I wanted to go back real quick, Vitus. John Harrison from Hawkwind and Frank Zappa? So you guys were in the same studio together?
There were two guys that managed the last, and they're both wonderful people, and I kind of lost contact with both of them. Gary Stewart is no longer with us, but he was more the manager of the band from a musical perspective, whereas Randall Wicks was handling bookings and trying to talk some sense into us, trying to get us better equipment, better gigs, and just really doing everything to make Joe's songs get heard. And of course, Randall's made a big name for himself in the music industry, helping people with publishing, not ripping people off, helping those people that have been ripped off. And he lined up something for us to record at the Village Recorder. The idea was that we would cut the backing tracks at the same studio down in the South Bay where SST stuff was cut.
Okay. And
then we'd bring the reels into a room at the Village Recorder and start work usually around midnight and use Steely Dan's equipment. And John Harrison had agreed to help us, first of all, with pre-production, and he helped David Nolte a lot with David's bass playing. David became an amazing bass player during those sessions, and of course he is today. And he really helped Jack Reynolds play along the bass player. Hawkwind was a pretty amazing band, and John Harrison was a founding member of that and was on the first album and went on to do all kinds of great stuff after that. But he really helped us put that album together, and at the time we were disappointed that we weren't going to hear Joe's distorted Les Paul on this stuff. It was all the Rickenbacker, and it was jangly, and he did pull through an amp, but he wanted it really, really clean, and John Harrison's argument was always, look, these other bands are a dime a dozen. If I grunge this stuff out, you're not going to hear the 60s influence, you're not going to hear the incredible harmonies, you're going to lose some of the melodic content. And what you guys have that other bands don't have isn't the melodic content. The other things pale in comparison. Joe's songwriting must stand out on this disc. Don't try to be this aggressive rock and roll band that you are live. Let me make a record that just chronicles Joe's homage to his influences. That's what the LA Explosion album was supposed to be. Fool Like You didn't fit in there and really didn't belong on the disc. But all of Joe's songs that serve a whole, plus the Rack, Mike's little story opening and ending, that was a beautiful way to start and stop the record. But John Harrison insisted on keeping it very clean and having Joe's songwriting be the forefront.
Wow. That's very, very cool. And then you mentioned Frank Zappa, so he was nearby?
Well, there's 4 rooms at Village, and I think it's still a studio today, but we were in this tiny room that was called the Royal Scam, and it had an MCI 24-track machine in it that instead of renting the machine, they just bought it. Steely Dan worked this out. And it had a nice little console up there. I think it was an API. And you could remote outboard gear from other studios, which John did with Glee. And we were next to the upstairs bathroom, the nicer bath, and there was a little kitchenette up there. The first time we saw John Harrison, this is on Santa Monica Boulevard across from Dolores' restaurant. It was a 24-hour restaurant back then, sort of a diner.
Okay.
And Zappa walks into the control room. We all, lose it. And we're just dead silent. And he's like, "Hey, John, is Dolores still open?" And John Harrison replies, "I called the health department, but they don't seem to be able to do anything about it." And Zappa walked back out. So I gave John Harrison a copy of the first record I produced for a different band. That was the Urinals.
Right.
The Surfing with the Shaw, 7-inch that had 4 songs on it. I gave it to John Harrison. The next evening at around midnight, I arrived for our LA Explosion session. I'm in front of that little camera pushing the doorbell button, a Village recorder. And John Harrison saunters over, lets me in, which he usually doesn't do. He walks me in, and there's this little conversation pit, step-down area with little saloon doors. And there's someone laying down on the couch in there. And he says, "Hey, Frank, I want to introduce you to someone. This is Vitus. He produced that record I gave you yesterday." Well, Zappa doesn't miss a beat, doesn't sit up, doesn't even move. Laying on his back, he says, "Worst damn record I've ever heard, but with a name like that, they should go far."
Oh my gosh, that's hilarious.
There's another evening where I arrived. This is across the street from the Purdue police station over there, right? And whatever Bootsy's disco band, whatever they're called, they're in the studio that, like, steadily revolving bands going through there. The big studio is booked by Fleetwood Mac. It's Tusk. It's just ongoing. And Zappa has Studio C just booked with John Harrison working with him during the day. And I pull up in the evening, and it's 1 a.m, and there's Mick Fleetwood with this giant thing that is supposed to simulate a huge doobie, and he's humping the front door of Village Recorder in time with Bootsy's disco band that are mixing. They were mixing so loud it was disturbing everyone.
Oh my God.
There were some great events,
Wow. So there's so many stories around LA Explosion that I've never even heard about. So this is incredible. I love this.
The little bathroom next to where we recorded had a little art installation over the toilet. And it was a bunch of those seat covers were all mashed together into a little head with eyes drawn on it. And the drawing was labeled "Chic Your Booty." I think that's where the name either carried forward or perhaps it was the inspiration for that piece upstairs, Studio D.
Wow.
Yeah, and then John Harrison, comes in one day. I totaled my dad's car just by parking it on the street. Some drunk ran into it, and it wasn't a good scene with my parents. And he comes and goes, "Hey, if you need a car, what's his name? Lindsey Buckingham just got a new BMW, and he's still got his 2002, the blue one that's parked out there, and he doesn't want to drive it home. If you want that car, you can just work out a deal with him." So at that point, before I didn't have to go find parking on a side street off of Santa Monica, I would just drive in with Lindsey Buckingham's BMW that I bought for like half of what it was worth as a replacement car to make it for my dad's car that I totaled. And I was treated like royalty for a little while there until they got wise to the fact that Buckingham couldn't be driving 2 BMWs there every day.
Wow, that's crazy. Did you keep the car, or you were just using it for the sessions?
Wait a minute, did I keep the car?
Yeah.
Yeah, I bought the car. It was my dad's car for years after that.
Wow. That's craziness. Wow.
Oh, just drive it off the lot, man. Have a good one.
Look, you can't drive it home. Do you want to buy it from him?
See, I think we need more than one episode with Venus.
Yeah, for sure.
Stories.
The guys that were working with Fleetwood Mac were really nice to us. They were really cool. And John Harrison would take me in there between sessions so I could check out, the equipment that they had. What's her name? Christine McVie was playing in terms of keyboards, what was in there. And there's this little entry vestibule as you go into the big studio that had fake transom windows with rear projection behind them, so they could set any time of day. And it would stay at that time of day as long as you were in there, which I think was their way of making people spend even more time in the studio, but also being very relaxed and unaware of the passage of time. There were no clocks.
Wow. Interesting strategy there. So.
Yeah, I pulled up one evening, and Adrian Ballou was on the bus bench in front of Village Recorders with a 2x4 with a Strat neck attached to it, and he had wireless headphones, which is a big deal in 77 or 78, and he was also playing a wireless guitar. And the deal was that whenever they would roll tape, and they were working on vocals, drums, percussion, editing, there was going to be a spare 24-track running, and every time they rolled tape, Ballou would solo. And they were saving all the solos, and they would just have extra solos if they ever needed one.
Wow.
John Harrison showed me the whole setup, was explaining how and why they were doing that.
Wow.
Extra solos.
Adrian Ballou was really nice.
Wow. That's crazy.
Oh,
okay, so Vitus, I wanted to jump back to the last Smile. So Beach Boys had Smile that never came out. You mentioned earlier we're talking about Look Again. To me, it sounds like you want to do like a Let It Be Naked kind of thing and get it back to its roots. On that album, you actually wrote 4 of the songs, right? So Snake in the Grass, Should I Say a Word, Everyone's a Holiday, and Subway Song, right? You had 4 songs on that album.
Yeah, there was a progression, and Joe didn't really care for that. I did not organize a mutiny in this band. I would like to point that out. I think that's one of the beefs. But there was a lot of support for my songs, and it came mostly from within the band, We didn't have much of a following. But I would always break out these little songwriting sessions with John Frank, and we called that Danny and the Doorknobs. And so there were songs like Up in the Air and whatever Subway song that were from that.
Sitting in the street to get tired, but I can't sleep at night. There's a shadow hanging over me. The city sleeps at night. The sky gazing and the street get dark. Dark shadows rush the light till nothing's black and nothing's white. The velvet out of sight. City's California bright. And keep my distance anyway. Can wait up for the light of day. I haven't got a lot to say. I take the subway home. I sit here all alone. There's something wrong with me. I feel the engines run. I must be the enemy. I take the subway home. I stand for all to see. I sit here all alone. There's something wrong with me. I must be the enemy. Can't control my destiny. Well, I'm the one that's like a upon the sea. Now what's hanging over me? I take the subway home.
So with each record, first album I had 1 song. Second album I had 4 songs. Third album I had 8 songs. So it was heading in the wrong direction there because I am not the primary songwriter. No matter how you slice it, in the last, it's about Joe. And Joe can write the songs that can go far. My songs are the oddities, or good filler material, I suppose. Some people like them. But the fact that my material is, becoming the critical mass to some of these albums wasn't good. I think that's one of the reasons why things kind of had to go a different way. On Look Again, there were only 3 songs. There was fill material. There was this thing called Should I Say a Word that was not a song. It was comprised between 5 and 7 parts. It was supposed to be cut up and put as transitions between other songs. My little joke was, should I say a word? It was between 2 of Joe's songs. This little thing comes in for 20 seconds and says, should I say a word? And then the next song plays. I wanted it to work like one big piece of music, like a pastiche of things with the should I say a word stuck in as little, excerpts from that recording to be used as pieces in the album. So that's one of the things that was a complete failure with this Joe Julian mix, just to run it with scratch vocal, a direct injection Farfisa, direct injection Rickenbacker, and direct injection bass, and a drummer that can't hear the band. It's got awful. But I think we could get it to a point where it's a little bit more enjoyable and you get a little bit more of the intent without overdubbing, without effects.
Wow. So is there a timeline for that? Is it actually...
well, I believe a timeline is being imposed on me right about now, Jeff, and I need to want to talk to you about where to send these tapes to have them baked.
Yes.
It's on 2-inch Agfa Gafer tape that's squirty. And, you roll it. It actually, puts brown muck all over everything. It squirts. It's got so much water content. So later after this thing, we'll get that address, and I'm going to get these things baked and transferred, and we're going to work on it right away. I'll bet you it'll be 3 months before we're ready to share this with that record company.
Wow. Soraya, can you believe this? This is not what I expected to hear. This is great.
I can either. So I don't know. Vitus just keeps, he's the gift that keeps giving today. Wow. Oof, oof, oof. Vitus, I wanted to ask you a little bit about Wharf Rat. So from what we can tell, 1983's Painting Smiles on a Dead Man was the final full-length album that you played on. You wrote or co-wrote a few songs on this record, including Up in the Air, that was released on Wharf Rat. Can you tell us about Wharf Rat, or, just...
Yeah. There was a record company that Joe started that was going to be he and I, and hopefully we're recording other bands. It was called Backlash. Mm-hmm. And we didn't want to call it Backlash Records, it was called Backlash Productions. And initially, as the last was moving forward there, we put out 3 singles of our own, but we wanted to put out stuff by other bands. And so I had this fictitious band, because my songs weren't fitting in there, that I want to call Danny and the Doorknobs. Nobody knows who they are. And we were going to put out a Danny and the Doorknobs single, and then we were going to put out David's other band that he had with his friends Billy and Frank, which is the Descendants. And we recorded Ride the Wild and a couple other songs. And then it was just David dropped out of that, and Tony took over on bass. They re-recorded this stuff. But originally, Backlash Productions had 3 bands in its roster. And we were all so excited about that. And that all kind of fell apart for a number of reasons, not the least of which was that Randall Wixon was doing publishing for bands like Journey and Creedence Clearwater Revival, and he'd taken the Backlash moniker, because he was really the one running it, and used it for his business, and told us, look, you're not putting out a Danny and the Doorknobs record on Backlash. Just pick another name, okay? And we did. We picked Wharf Rat. And I was recording bands all the time as demos to help them get gigs or to get them ready to go in the studio with somebody else. And I just felt like doing a compilation would be really fun. And it was something that Gary Stewart and I put together, very lo-fi. I think we put out a single or 2 first by The Question. And then there's the Wednesday Week EP in the in the oven working its way to being released. And the Wharf Rat Tales album was really the raunchiest recordings that I'd done in the last rehearsal garage. So Wharf Rat was sort of Gary's and mine.
Oh, okay. And on that Wharf Rat, there's a couple Rain Parade songs on the compilation. Did you record those 2 songs?
Yeah, I think we recorded 4 tunes. And then when it was reissued, I believe a third one of those 4 songs that I recorded with them was added. It's before they'd been in the studio, to do their great debut record. And they just had the feel of Rain by the Beatles down so perfectly. And this just preceded the period of time where Mike Nolte left the Last, and we were desperately trying to reconstruct the band in a different way. And one of the people that we, had come and try out for the band and talked to for the longest time was David Roback. But I recorded the Rain Parade stuff before they went into the studio and made a real record. The stuff was kind of raw. And I know, they weren't really pleased that the third track suddenly appeared when Don Williams, did the unabridged version. But it was a labor of love. It was a record that was going to cost money to put out, but not bring any money back. It was just for fans to hear the stuff. And Matt accepted that, and it was really gracious about it. But we couldn't pay royalties. We were hoping to sell, like 300.
Yeah.
It never happened. I think we gave away 300.
Oh, that's a great compilation. It's so good. I know several of us that own it.
There's a volume 2, and it's got it actually has a white glove test track on it. Between the Oars is on there, I think.
Wow.
Yeah.
Very cool.
And it's
nice.
Yeah,
Nice
it's got all kinds of good stuff on it. And, House of Freaks is on that volume 2. Sylvia Juncosa is on there. Angst. I was producing a lot of SST stuff by the mid-'80s. And so while Warfrat Tales was volume 1, Son of Warfrat Tales was 88, 89.
Oh, okay. And that had a lot of tunes on that one. Because that was a CD.
Yeah, it would have better Leaving Train songs, actually. Although I love the 2 that are on the first Warfrat. They just weren't recorded well enough. I just wish I'd done a better job recording the Leaving Trains. I got to do a bunch of sessions with them. The songs were always great. But I liked grungy stuff just a little bit too much, and it isn't, intense, powerful grungy stuff. And for some people, it doesn't carry enough weight when the material is that powerful.
Wow.
Yeah.
So you readjusted for the CD release with their Leaving Train song.
CD release of Warfrat, Son of Warfrat Tales?
Yes. Yeah.
It's just a freebie. It was pressed up, it was just as cassettes, because I couldn't afford to make the CDs in '89. And we're going to have just 100 copies, freebie CDs, just for the bands.
Nice.
A lot of people never got to hear it. The cassettes were gone so fast.
Wow. Yeah, I'd like to grab one of those, for sure.
Okay.
So
I'll keep that in mind.
So
we talked about The Wanderer. Actually, we already have, and it's one song per band. So we already have Between the Oars, I think is the song that we picked back then.
Okay. Very cool. So another song I wanted to talk about from Painting Smiles was Leper Colony, and that was a co-write that you did with Kill. And he's, of course, in Danny and the Doorknobs and Trotsky Icepick with you, but he's also part of 100 Flowers and the Urinals that we were talking about earlier. So you were telling us a story about a Danny and the Doorknobs recording that was a result of not everybody showing up for a last session that was booked, right? So,
that's absolutely right. That's absolutely correct.
So it was... Yeah, can you tell us about that?
At the time, the last consisted of John Frank on drums, John Rosewall on bass, and he could have played a lot of the guitar parts in the studio too, and really helped us out there. And of course, Joe. And we had agreed that it has to be primarily Joe songs, otherwise the record's not going anywhere. And we were toying with 2 different albums, and they're sort of concept records based on self-deprecating titles. So we were working on a record called Some People Never Learn, that was to be the follow-up to Painting Smiles from a Dead Man. And we're going to record with Ethan James. We put together a bunch of material that we're going to do. There's songs that the last recorded later without the rest of us in the band any longer. But we had scheduled 2 Saturday sessions back-to-back, I think it was, in June of 1983 with Ethan James. And I was coordinating everything, and I was going to co-produce this thing with Ethan. There was talk of asking Bill Englot if he'd be willing to come back despite how badly we treated him, come back and help us. That was an on and off thing. But the first Saturday that we were going to record backing tracks, Joe didn't show up. He said, whatever, I don't think it's ready. I'm not coming. And so I called Kel, with whom we've been, jamming for quite a while, and said, hey, come in and do the Joe parts, will you? That simply isn't possible. But we recorded a bunch of song ideas that Kel and I had. We just, winged it, and we had 15 backing tracks in one day. So we went back the next Saturday. I'd spent a week writing lyrics and stuff, and we recorded all the overdubs. And that became Poison Summer. And we handed out free cassettes, and we went back a few years later, and we had Trotsky Icepick at that point, and the idea was, well, we should fix that first Danny and the Doorknobs record, just mix it right, because it was sort of a rush job at Ethan's. And we wanted that to come out before the other record did, so they came out at the same time, which gave us the brilliant idea. If we're going to change the name of the band again, let's never play 2 shows in a row using the same band name. And let's use the same title for every record we record from this point forward, but change the name of the band.
Wow.
And that then was superseded when this guy Joel Roberts found this photo in a photomat dumpster of, this baby. And we just thought, baby. Here we go. This is going on the cover. You can't call it anything other than baby. So maybe it's a daisy chain. Let's see. Danny the Doorknobs records Poison Summer. Then a band called Poison Summer records Trotsky Icepick. Then a band called Baby records Trotsky Icepick.
Wow.
Yeah, we're thinking how we could make it, so it would be whatever.
Yeah.
It's very clear that we weren't trying to gather a following or particularly make in the music industry. At that point, we were militants who had no interest of selling anything to anybody, and we were doing this for our own pleasure. And that comes from being in the last. There were 10 years in the last we tried everything to get songs that would get us signed, get the attention of A&R guys. We were either too 60s for them or just a little bit too rough or whatever, or not pop enough for them. But Joe's songs are pop songs. No two ways about it. For 10 years, we can't get these people's attention. And finally, I'm no longer in last. I've given up on this thing. 72 to 83 was it. My time, my time in the last. This other stuff, we're going to entertain ourselves first and foremost.
Wow. Yeah. Forget about trying to gain a following if you're going to change the name of the band every time you do something. Right?
It has that cushion in it that if you really pump, it doesn't matter.
Oh my God. Okay, well, I want to talk about one of the links in the daisy chain here about the latest Danny and the Doorknobs album. I'm sorry, I'm still trying to wrap my head around that constant changing, but I just love the idea behind it. So the new release, Jukebox in the LA River, the band's third release in 30 years, came out earlier this year on Poison Summer Records. We wanted to ask you to please share with our listeners how this album was put together and about the other members of the band.
Well, I wasn't playing in bands, and I got this call 10, 12 years ago from Kel Johansson's like, hey, the Meat Puppets want us to open for them on the West Coast tour. I said, yeah, that's great, go do it. He says, no, they want Trotsky Icepick, and they want us to play Barry Manilow or whatever. Are you game? And no, I've heard myself sing, and it's not a good idea. Is John Tally Jones game? Yeah, John's. Oh, then I'm in. And we did those shows, and it sort of started this whole new thing with Trotsky. We were writing songs and recording, and then the usual fighting broke out where we couldn't agree on anything that ended up this I Haunted Myself record, right? And it was all, not compromises, but there was so much negotiation in that. The songs that didn't fit in there, I felt like just recording them for fun with John Frank and Kel Johansson off to the side, or, I'd kind of get to call the shots, but John Tally Jones was willing to come in and sing on some of that stuff. And we recorded at Sunny Bells in Long Beach, and I just invited other people like Jimmy Lennon Jr. to come and play keyboards. And thankfully, Watson was available from Slovenly. He came in and played on it. And nobody knew where these songs were going. They were little nuggets that I brought in. We did start with an old Last song, Painting Smiles on a Dead Man, just so there'd be something that at least John Frank and I kind of knew.
What you've begun, no need to carry on. over, things settle down. This would seem so heavy. Let it go. Let it go. Pain and smiles on a dead man. Oh, let it go. Let it go. No more I told you so. Let it go. Nothing he ought to know. Right or wrong, then make it so. It'll never get even. Stop and justice always do so. Do not seek revenge. Not that's been said, and you've seen red. Hey, buddy, let it go. Let it go. Let it go. Pain and smiles on a dead man. Oh, let it go. Let it go. No more I told you so. Let it go. Nothing he ought to know. Right or wrong, then make it so. It'll never get even. Stop and justice always do so. Do not serve revenge. Not now it's been said, and you've seen red. Hey, buddy, let it go. Let it go.
The story behind that is that it was an old song that we'd never put out, but I'd written a new song. I was all proud of it, and then suddenly realized, oh, it's the melody from I plagiarized myself. So let's put it back in its original form here. But that was a fun one to start with because it had an arrangement, and then all the other ones we just made up in the studio. And again, that was for our own entertainment. I don't know that it was wise to put it out. I don't think it translates well. And we're not playing that stuff live except for 2 of the songs that are on there. It was a studio experiment. And it probably should have been called Trotsky IcePick Presents Danny and the Doorknob Performing Jukebox in the LA River.
Wow.
I think that should have been.
Wow.
See, it just continues. It's just ad infinitum. I love it. So I
Yeah.
want to switch. I want to switch gears. Views. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, go right ahead. Whatever you're going to is more important.
I highly doubt that. I wanted to ask about then Trotsky IcePick. So not only is it a great name, but a great lineup, and very similar to the lineup of Danny and the Doorknobs. So
Yes, it is an amazing similarity.
so what distinguishes the 2 bands from one another?
If we have a Trotsky gig and somebody can't make it, and it's going to be the B product, then it's Danny and the Doorknobs.
That's
Danny and the
hilarious.
Doorknobs might not have a drummer one night, or he might not have a singer, and I think that's what you guys witnessed. It's the same band.
Wow.
It's just yeah, and with Danny and the Doorknobs we do just the old stuff. Although we did do now I can't even remember the songs. Ballad of Bobby Fuller. We did that live. That was off the new Danny record. But we're doing that in the Trotsky set, too, because we like playing it so much. And it is much better when John Tally Jones handles the lead vocals. And then the other night, we played a song that I wrote for my wife that's in the set. And I don't know why the name escapes me. But anyway, we don't do much stuff from the record. We use the Danny sets mostly to play the Baby album.
Okay.
Hey, I think you're
'Cause
selling.
I sang most of that record with Kat.
I think you're selling yourself short as a singer because you're at least what you on recordings and what you did at that live performance in Long Beach. You've got a great voice yourself.
Yeah.
It's a good voice for harmonies, especially singing along with John Tally Jones. I'm not comfortable being the lead singer, but that's all right. If it's the scene at the club, when the last is going to be performing the LA Explosion record in sequence, and we're there before other bands are doing their sound checks, perfect time for Danny the Doorknobs to perform half the Baby album. And then I'm fine with it. But I don't want to be on another bill for people come expecting a rock and roll band that knows what they're doing. And that's kind of, I'll leave it at that. I'm not confident singing. I like singing backup. Singing harmonies is fun.
Fair enough. You sounded great that day. And the band, I thought,
Thank you.
The band was tight and fun. That was very good. Not a King
they're my best friends.
Yeah. I wouldn't say not like a King Crimson kind of tight, but tight and a lot of fun. Yeah, very
That's
good.
Problematic.
Hey, Vitus, we had a conversation in Long Beach that was really interesting to me that I wanted to talk about again shortly, and that was your relationship with Greg Ginn and SST. You had a unique perspective that I hadn't heard before, and it was a positive experience with SST. Can you share that with our listeners?
You mean the guys in Sonic Youth and those other bands are going around just saying how wonderful SST was?
Exactly.
Exactly. Well, loved Black Flag, mostly because of Greg's guitar playing. And I don't know if you know this, but the third singer in Black Flag was actually Joe Nolte. Between Ron and Dez, the singer was Joe. It lasted about 3 weeks, but Joe's voice didn't last 3 weeks performing with both bands. And I never got to see any of their rehearsals. It must have been pretty great. But Greg's, whatever you want to call that metallic charge of sound coming out of a guitar was something that I loved it. I loved the Black Flag intensity of those shows. When they signed with Unicorn, I was some crazy lady that wanted to run this label, and I was going to put out the next Black Flag album. They invited us to come down and love the studio where they're going to record and have us be the second album to come out on that label. And Greg was really supportive, got the material, where we're not trying to be the next Black Flag. He understood Joe is the songwriter that needs to be heard and can appeal on a broad spectrum, right? He really wanted the last to record the Look Again album for Unicorn, and we were into that. But I think it was Chuck, or Joe was more in touch with them than I was, but I think Chuck warned us that they were already having problems with the lady that ran Unicorn, and that we should just wait till things settle down. And then SST got going on its own, of course, and putting out hundreds of records, and the last should have been putting out Look Again and other stuff right away. Every time I saw Greg, he'd always say, "What's going on? We'll put out that Look Again demo, fix it, we'll put it out, record a new record, talk to Joe, please. Are you producing anything? If you are, bring it to me." Really encouraging, really supportive. And at the time, I was not really doing recording. I was, working as an architect, and that was pretty much full-time, and I was kind of out of the band scene. And then I mentioned to him, well, we're playing this Trotsky IcePick stuff. We kind of having fun. Bring it to me. I said, well, we already put it out. Here it is. He goes, well, just forget it. Let me repress these things, put this on SST, go record something new. Really supportive. Would come to the Trotsky IcePick shows and, have specific comments about the songs and what he liked and where we were doing great, and just said, go into a studio, I'll pay for the studio, I want to put this stuff out. Then there were other bands that, working with the Leaving Trains, oh my God, produce the Leaving Trains, I'll put it out. Really supportive of anything that went in there, and then conversely saying, hey, we've got Angst. John Telly Jones produced this EP, it's not on our label, we're reissuing it, they're doing another record, please go work with them if they want to work with you. So I got to do 40 projects or so for SST.
Wow.
And every one of them was a really great experience. Every discussion with Greg Ginn was awesome. And everything ended on really good terms. Now, that's my perspective, and that's a little myopic, because an SST release of a Trotsky IcePick record is going to flounder financially. It is not going to break even. And what you realize all of a sudden is there's a Sonic Youth release over there that made a bunch of money. They never were paid that because over here's Trotsky IcePick putting up, stuff along with Zoob's Riff that's going to lose money. So they were financing our little adventures, and I think that's where the bad blood comes in.
Okay.
Oh, one moment, please.
Okay, not a problem.
Oh, yeah, no problem. Go ahead. Sorry.
So
I'm in my little office, and builders show up to ask questions.
Not a problem. There's money that needs to be made first.
Yeah.
So
I'm not being paid for that. I'm making more money talking to you guys.
So SST ended up putting out 6 Trotsky Icepick albums.
Yes. The last 2 are kind of interesting in that Hot Pop Hello was a Leftovers record. And it seemed at the time that when we recorded Baby, that we left off some of the best songs. And that was sort of flip of a coin at the very end. The Baby session all centered around a movie called Hellbent by Richard Casey. And we were doing the soundtrack for that along with Sylvia Juncosa and a band called Drowning Pool. And when we record stuff, we kind of say, oh, that's pretty cool. It was all recorded Wednesday nights at band practice, pretty much live. And that's why the record has that sound. There's no one in the control room. It's just us playing in a room. We recorded things like Van Gogh's Ear. That was a requested title by Richard Casey. And then 2 pieces of music that he described to us that became Wall of Flies, and I don't know what the other one was called, Rolling Blind. They were just tacked on to the end. But everything else were ballads and love songs in there, like Empty Reel and stuff. And we kept those off because I just felt it was the wrong presentation of a bunch of little love songs stuck in there. So the Baby record got stripped back. The stuff that was left over, along with other leftover tracks from the El Kabong record, the 2 Poison Summer records, was all bunched together. And as it turned out, it's the best Trotsky Icepick record. All the combination of the songs there, all the best actually ended up on that, including a song that we still play live called Dark Engine. The other album that came out at the very end of Trotsky was recorded in one afternoon, straight with live vocals. It's called Carpet Bomb the Rip, and there's a story behind that. But there were songs that we wrote on tour, and we would walk on stage, and Cal would say, God, I don't even know what chord does this song. We're starting the set with a new song. What was the first chord in this damn song? And Mike Patton would just say, don't worry about it. Carpet Bomb the Riff.
Nice.
That was an album where it was well rehearsed on the road, and we were just going to go in and wing it to SST. Of course, it's the worst record we made, but it has some of John Jones's best lyrics and best melodies on it. It was formative. So it was our look again, as it were, but it was recorded much better than that.
Wow. Okay. All right. I've got to ask one more question about Trotsky, and it's the title of the new album, I Haunted Myself.
Yeah.
Just released. I gotta ask, why the title I Haunted Myself? Or where'd that come from?
Yeah, John had a cardiac event and ended up, I guess, in a coma.
Wow.
And I don't know the exact quadruple bypass or whatever it was. It was just bad and scary. And he had that sort of out-of-body experience where he knew that he was gone, but I could tell when Kathy was in the room, and he could experience certain things. But it was not a good thing, but he felt like he was no longer in his body. And in the song, he describes the different sensations and the experience as a whole. Hence, I haunted myself.
Was a ghost, I haunted myself. Couldn't look in the mirror, I couldn't drink from the glass. My fingers couldn't touch the world, too forceful, so bright. I shuddered for warmth, to be solid again. Oh, then the spark surprising the skin, a scent aloft from your fingers found its way in. Lost in a cloud, I was the cloud. Floated off the ground, afraid to touch down. A thoughts would evaporate right away on the steam. spark surprising the skin, Santa locks on your fingers. Then the spark surprising the skin, Santa locks on your fingers, found its way. Surprising the skin, Santa locks on your fingers. Then the spark surprising the skin, Santa locks on your fingers, found its way in.
The song is the first song that Trotsky IcePick ever played live in 1979. Back then it was called Domino Line, and I always hated the lyrics. And when we got together to play shows with the Meat Puppets shortly after John was well again, and he had those words, and he made suggestions on the arrangement of this old song, Domino Line, so that it suited his purposes. And then the song completely morphed. And playing that song live is really, really fun. But it's also rather an emotional thing. There are a few other emotional songs that are songs that are deep-rooted that John Tally Jones brought into the band that are the good songs on that record. A lot of the other stuff are things where we couldn't agree on things, and that's the only thing I sense when I hear the record. It's like, man, we should have just canned that. We have so many other songs, but certain members of the band insisted on finishing that material that was recorded at that time. So there it is on the record. It's a document. The title track is one of the best songs on there. And we also went back and we re-recorded one of the older John Tally Jones songs called Clyde's Planet. I love doing that one live. There are a few other significant songs that John wrote that are on there.
It's a great album. We've been listening to that lately, and I actually love that album.
Thank you.
I think the Danny and the Doorknobs album is really quite good, too. It's a really good one. So
yes. Lower level.
Yeah. So was the process for recording I Haunted Myself the same as Jukebox in the LA River?
Not at all. We would rehearse the songs, go in and record backing tracks at Hunter Crowley's studio. And then, have organized overdub sessions and work on the arrangements together, have terrific arguments about every single song, every single harmony part, and then mix it. And finally it was decided that the album will never be mixed if you put 5 of us in there. So best just send Kel, and Kel will get a little bit of input from John Tally Jones, and at that point, that's the mix. That's how dysfunctional the whole thing became. So Danny and the Doorknobs, there will be no discussion of what we are going to play. We actually don't know what the chords are in the chorus, but whatever everybody ends up playing in the first chorus, please play that in the second and third chorus also. And these two guys are going to solo on this one, and it's in the key of, A minor, and here we go.
So basically you would
I've got words on this napkin that I wrote,
nice.
during coffee break.
So basically you guys would just carpet bomb the riffs.
Yes, we would. And the Danny and the Doorknobs record really is just, playing nuggets and jamming. And the arrangements are horrifically bad because you've got 4 guitarists. Sometimes someone's just sitting it out because they can't tell what the other guys are doing. And, well, that's how it is.
Wow. Well, it makes for a very interesting record, I'll say that.
I agree.
Yeah.
And it's
every song, it sounds like the cover looks, the Gronk cover.
I think we can debate that. I don't think so, but oh my. I wanted to ask one last question about Trotsky IcePick. Trotsky has been playing fairly regularly around the LA area. Just personally, do you prefer playing live, or are you still more inclined and more comfortable working in the studio?
I like both now. I think I've matured to the point where I'm okay playing live, as long as I'm out there with my buddies. I've played, I've filled in parts with a few other bands, and I never have time to rehearse or get ready. And that is a real problem. Like when you're asked to play keyboards for the Rain Parade, and you can't even get together with them to do anything, and you're not entirely sure what you're going to do up there. But walking up with Trotsky, it doesn't matter. It's so second nature. I'm always going to do the same thing whether I've rehearsed it or not. I really enjoy this. They're my dearest friends, and in a certain sense, we have little in common, and in another sense, we have everything in common. And it's about friendships. These are the guys that didn't blow themselves up with drugs. These are the guys that are they're really good characters and personalities, and they're doing interesting things with their lives. And they're also very, very good musicians and interesting songwriters. When we get together, sometimes we don't actually play a lot of music. I end up asthmatic from laughing so hard. The stories and the exchanges are just the best. And I hate to say it, but one of the highlights are the arguments between John Telly Jones and Kel Johansson. They are just the best. They are mythical in some regards. I don't know how many of these stories about what used to happen in Hunter Flowers recording sessions, but they were really, it was very creative. There's a lot of tension in the room, and a lot of very funny stuff went down.
Wow.
And that still happens, and I love it when it does, when they're not really mad at each other. It's just the best.
Wow. Can I make a suggestion, Vitus, that as a producer, can you record these arguments between Kel and John, and then put some music behind it, and let's put a release out?
See, carpet bomb the road.
We were recording with Randy Byrne, the guy that recorded Mega. We were doing the Hunter Flowers record in this Orange County Recorders. And Cal has specific ideas on the songs that he writes. He wants the bass to go a certain way. There's only two guys playing something other than drums, right? And John Telly Jones has a knack for melody and coming up with this aggressive counterpoint on the bass. That is what the band is about. That's half the band is right there. The rest of it is Cal's rhythm guitar playing that's so unique. And Cal requests politely, John, that note right there, that fret, you can't say, don't play the G sharp. I say, that note on that string at that fret, do not play that note. And John thinks that's funny that he's being told not to play a note. He says, this note, or this note, or that note. And Cal says, with the mic on and everybody else hearing it clearly, says, look, I'll put it very plainly. You play that note again, and I'm going to kick your ass.
So punk rock. Oh, my God.
Oh, and he wasn't just half kidding.
Oh. Wow.
There were some of the best arguments. But, in all that, there's that spark of creativity. They would strip things down to the core. And the Hunter Flowers records are some of the stuff that I'm proud of. I have nothing to do with writing the material. I was just there trying to capture the stuff. And I loved the stuff we did at the Urinals recording, too.
Oh, yeah, that's great stuff. Great stuff.
Yeah.
So, Vitus, we wanted to switch gears before we let you go. We wanted to talk a little bit about your daytime job. So, some of these designs that you have for these homes are incredible. These are pieces of art. I mean, some of these homes that you've designed that I've seen, they're just absolutely incredible. I have to imagine that you're very passionate about this.
Yeah, I always wanted to be an architect, and that was, when I was about 6 years old, it was a big deal to me. I just kind of lost track of that when I graduated from Loyola High School. And I had very good grades and could get into just about any college, but didn't bother to apply. But I knew I wanted to go to an architecture school. And what kind of dashed all that was that I didn't apply to any schools. And then my mother forced me to go to school or get a job or whatever. I wasn't going to lollygag as an 18-year-old not going to school. So I was working for Max Starkman, an architectural firm, just briefly, and then working for another architect in Brentwood who was in his late 70s and had done a lot of the mission-style Spanish Revival houses in Bel Air, William Stratton. And I learned a lot from that and just walked onto the UCLA campus not having applied and got laughed at. and did actually get into concurrent enrollment because I was willing to work on something where they needed a drafts person in the physics department. And I ended up loving the physics department and ended up working on a large Van de Graaff generator being installed in the basement of Newton Hall, doing a lot of the drawings for that, and subsequently getting jobs working on particle accelerators, Palo Alto Research Center and other places. And eventually it allowed me to loop back to architecture, but in the meanwhile, I helped people design recording studios, stabilized large tennis courts on sites that were not necessarily stable until we got there, and I did a few remodels. Then I got into grad school in architecture and didn't like it, but it happened at the same time as I was being offered commissions to design buildings or additions. And I showed that to one of the professors and said, look, I've got these two commissions that are almost side by side in Topanga for new houses. These are my sketches for these things, and here are my two signed contracts. I got retainers to design these two houses. Can I use one of these as my A project in my first year? And the guy just looked at me and said, look, if you're getting these commissions right now, I suggest you put 100% of your energy into this thing. When you stop getting these commissions, then you come back to us. Because if I had these two commissions, I wouldn't be teaching this class.
Wow.
So that led to a whole series of these things. And I'm inspired by the 1920s modernist movement, which was the second wave of modernism. And I like concrete. I like express structure where you see what the building is made out of. And there's that honesty in materials. This is steel, this is concrete, this is glass. And some of it, yes, it can be wood, but wood is used for decoration. It's not good in a fire zone to build houses out of wood. And then the shape of the buildings. There's an ergonomics to it where you look at the building and the proportions are right and it's beautiful, but it also serves certain explicit purposes because not everybody wants the same house or the same office. I've designed a winery and a wine tasting room, done a lot of little home recording studios and stuff, but lately I'm just doing houses. And currently my office is working on over 40 house designs. At the same time, we have 42 commissions that aren't finished yet. And we're doing an immense project in Amman, Jordan. It's a residence. So yeah, we're busy.
Wow. Wow. That's amazing. That's amazing. Yeah, and the few that I've seen are absolutely incredible. Just mind-blowing.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm really enjoying this.
You got quiet.
We're about to move.
Oh.
And I don't know what that's going to mean because I don't want to hire more people. I don't want this to turn into a firm. It's really about, it's the size of a band right now. There's me and 5 others. And it's about as big as I would want this office to get. I would rather do fewer houses, but really do them in better detail. And lately, as of last November, I'm particularly focused on the fire-resistant construction. A couple of my houses just absolutely fried. In one case, it's the last house standing on that street, and we built it to be fire-resistant, and it made it. It did really, really well. It fried for about 72 hours. Every window in it is melted, but the house did not ignite. And there are things we did there that I want to repeat in the upcoming buildings here.
Wow.
And I'd like to see fewer people lose their homes. We have this ridiculous thing in the building code that buildings need a 1-hour fire-resistant coating on roofs and walls. And then there's no fire department to protect it, and it's going to sit there for 4 days and burn. That's not going to work. So we're looking at long-term fire resistance.
Wow.
I know that's what you wanted to talk about.
No, yeah. No, it was absolutely interesting.
No, but I will say after the fires last year, you were pretty vocal about the need for looking at different sort of home construction. I as a homeowner myself, I live in the Southern California area. I live in a fire area. That was really informative for me because then it began to inform the choices that I have to make as, my home ages and as I look to do new things. I have to really think about what is best for the area that I live in, so I just want to thank you. I thought it was very, very informative.
Oh, yeah, call anytime with questions. It's my other passion.
Oh my gosh.
We definitely will. So, Vitus, we did want to let you go. We didn't want to take up all your day, and we thank you for accepting our call so early in the morning. I know you got a lot going on, but I wanted to thank you so much for everything that we touched on. We could do multiple episodes talking to you about stuff, and you're so eloquent, and I really appreciate all the information that you've given to us. And regardless of what you say, I want to encourage our listeners, definitely go out and get Jukebox in the LA River by Danny and the Doorknobs and I Haunted Myself by Trotsky Icepick. Soraya and I have been listening to both of those. They're incredible records.
Yes.
And if you see either one of these bands listed in any live shows, definitely check them out. They're
if you
great.
See Trotsky Icepick playing Danny and the Doorknobs, or Danny and the Doorknobs playing Trotsky Icepick,
Right.
So
Very clear.
Yeah.
Thanks, you guys. It's been real fun. And I urge you to interview David Nolte sometime.
Excellent. Well,
One of my favorite people on the planet. He will have a completely different take on this stuff, and it will all be true and accurate, and it'll be so fun.
Perfect. We'll try to take you up.
All right.
All right.
Take care.
Thank you so much. Soraya, how much do we love this guy?
So much. You know, I thought I really liked his. I mean, his stories are great, but just getting to hear a little bit of Wharf Rat, like that story for me was really interesting, and how supportive Greg Ginn was.
Yeah, that when we were talking about that at Alex's bar in Long Beach, that was a perspective I've never heard, because I've heard quite a few stories about SST, and it was really nice to hear a positive bent on it, a different perspective that I haven't heard before. And yeah, I really, really appreciated hearing that story, and I thought it would be good for our listeners to hear that. And what about how you mentioned to me offline about how his views on Joe Nolte are. So
he's like a real big. I mean, duh, they were in a band together and they're friends. But I think he really is clear and definitive in his support of Joe Nolte, but not just Joe Nolte as a person. He said Joe Nolte was writing songs every day. And then at one point there were 160 songs. And he said, at some point, these songs have to see the light of day. And, you know, that really blew me away. And I think that's what, it's perspectives like that, right? You and I have talked before about how, you know, someone needs to commit Joe Nolte's stories down and get this oral history out. But then you have people like Vitus, you know, just kind of reaffirming, yeah, there's still a lot more production. Notice what he said. He goes, playing live, yeah, that's fun, but we got to get these recorded.
Yep.
And the fact that there's an effort to put out Look Again,
oh my gosh,
remixed, remastered, and he kept using the term like have it more pleasant sounding. And I'm thinking, okay, then there's a lot in the vault that we just don't know about, because it just never had a moment to be seen. But I'm sorry, the daisy chain of Trotsky Icepick and Danny and the Doorknobs, that's what kills me. And I mean, you see it, he has a lot of false modesty. You know, I'm not a good singer. Oh, the band, you know, we play things not that well. Band is really tight. You said it. We saw it at Alex's bar. And those guys look like they're having fun.
Absolutely, yeah. Oh, one thing I forgot, now that you mentioned that, I forgot to ask him this. They all have nicknames for each other. They don't call each other by their names. He did on the show. But when we were talking at the show, they all have like funny nicknames, like names of pies or something crazy. Like really funny nicknames for each other. To your point that they all like to have fun together.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Well, write that down. That's for our second.
Right.
That's when we interview Vitus about Trotsky Icepick.
Right. And I wanted to mention, as a musician, talking about Vitus as a producer, when White Glove Test was recording our album Leap, we were in the studio. There was one song, I normally play guitar, but there was one song where we all switched around a bit and I was playing bass. We had the song called Every Day, which was going to end our album. And I was trying to play this bass part, and I'm not a bass player. I'm barely a guitar player, but definitely not a bass player. So I'm trying to lay down this bass part. And typically what we would do is we'd record all the basic tracks as a band, and then we'd go in and do overdubs, add extra guitar parts or whatever, add the singing in later, the background singing. But all of the band sounded great except for my bass part. So I had to go in and redo my bass part, and I'm trying to track this over and over and over, multiple times, being unsuccessful, not feeling it, not getting the part down. And Vitus comes in the room, I remember, we're into the recording room, and he's like, Jeff, come over here. So he brings me into the mixing room. Well, normally you don't record in the mixing room, in the control room. You're in the studio part, right? And he comes in, and he tells the band to take a break. Like, you guys go for a walk, go outside. I'm going to work with Jeff on this. So he sits me down. He goes, I was playing a Rickenbacker bass, a really beautiful bass, had a really beautiful sound. And he says, Jeff, why don't you sit down? I'm going to give you a different bass. He gave me a glass of water, and he said, let's take a little break. And so he just started talking about random stuff. And later I figured out what he was trying to do is just calm me down. And then so he's like, I'm going to have you record this here in the control room. And here's a different bass. It was a bass that belonged to John Rosewell. That was a member of Danny and the Doorknobs, The Last, and Trotsky IcePick. And it was sitting in the control room. It was like a lime green bass. And he goes, you're not used to playing this, but let's see what you can do with this. And then he's like, about like 10 to 15 minutes later, after us chatting for a bit, he said, let's see what happens, in the control room with this different bass. And in one take, I nailed the session. And it was all because of the way that Vitus made it all happen. So he put me at ease, put a different instrument in my hand, put me in a different location, being in the studio, and he was just sitting there watching at the control board. And I always look back, and the few times that I've listened to that recording since then, I always think of that. Like, Vitus made that recording happen, and I'm really proud of that bass part. I mean, it's the best that I could do. I'm not a bass player, but it was really nice the way that he produced and controlled that situation to make it all happen. So I just wanted to add that in as a perspective of a musician looking at Vitus as a producer. So
see, and that's what I think good teachers, so good producers do, is they find a way to get out of you what they want to hear and what they know that you're capable of doing. It doesn't surprise me.
Yeah.
For the little that I know about Vitus, it does not surprise me whatsoever. Incredible.
Nice. Oh, well, that was a really, really, really fun episode. And hopefully we can take up Vitus on his suggestion to bring in David Nolte to talk about. Yeah. So there should be some great stories there.
Dang.
And so just wanted to let everybody know on our next episode, we should be hearing from Ronnie Barnett talking about the new Muffs album.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That's
October the 18th.
On Omnivore, No Holiday by the Muffs. So hopefully we can talk to Ronnie, and that will be our next episode. And for those, as we were talking about at the top of the episode, we have this contest. You've only got a few days left. Information's on our social network pages. We'd love to hear entries and hear what you guys think.
Absolutely.
And there's prizes to choose from.
Yay! Always good when there's a giveaway. So, gente, agruviar.
Groove on, Paisley people. You know what I'm going to do right now?
What?
Save this.
I rotate sideways in the dark and travel in a flat and dark yo-yo, going round the world. Reflective light with lover dark. Netherworld's my private part. so cold and it's awful quiet.